take a roll?
Yes, I'd be happy to. Okay, Andy Sandoval. Brian Poor. Ed Winfield.
Here.
Okay, Greg Platask.
Here.
Jeff Sheets.
Present with City of Avondale.
Jim Keene. Justin Fair. Kim Clark. Chris Damolin.
Here.
Mark Wittenberg.
Here.
Mike Chickarone.
Present.
Phil Oslin. Robert Fisher.
Here.
Sasan Puri Tizadi.
Here.
Steve Holiday. Tom Bacombe. Tracy Mills.
Here.
And Chair Cutright, you are here as well. I see.
Yes.
Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We barely have quorum.
All right. All right. Leave it to Elmirage to make it close, right, Mark? We'll get on.
Absolutely.
All right. Are there any other members participating we've not called? If not, please remember to mute your mic and phones when you're not speaking. So at this time, members of the public were asked to submit written comments related to this meeting on the MAG website within an hour of the posted start time for the meeting. And David, have we received any public comment?
Chair, we received no public comment for this item or any other item on the agenda.
Awesome. We'll carry on. So with regards to the minutes for January 20th, could I have a motion to recommend approval of the January 20th meeting minutes?
Motion
moved,
to approve.
Second.
All right, so we got Tracy and Mark with the second. All those in favor?
Oh, I got to do the roll call vote. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, you're right. I'll shut up.
All right. Ed Winfield.
Yes.
Greg Placat. Sorry, last name Platask.
Platez.
Okay.
Close enough. Yeah.
Jeff Sheets.
Aye.
Chris Demolin.
Yes.
Mark Wittenberg.
Yes.
Mike Chickarone.
Aye.
Robert Fisher.
Yes.
Sasan Puri Tizadi.
Yes.
Tracy Mills.
Yes.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Is there anybody else that I missed? The motion passes unanimously.
Awesome. So we'll move to item 4 then, and we've got a presentation from Yanni Corrales. Hopefully I didn't butcher it that much.
No, that's correct. Thank you.
Awesome. If you want to introduce yourself and then go ahead with your presentation, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today. My name is Yanni Corrales. I am a Vice President Analyst at Gartner, and I cover technology, sourcing, procurement, and vendor management. My research is focusing on how to mature our capabilities, how to try and do things more effectively and efficiently. And I cover both the private sector and public sector. I have been working with numerous states and federal government here in the US. So I'm learning a lot myself as well, because from state to state and even county to county, regulations or laws or even policies change. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you today and have a conversation. If that's okay, let me share my screen so we can go ahead and start. And please, let's try and make this as interactive as possible. I don't want, it's difficult when you are remote to stay interested on one person just presenting. So please don't hesitate to write your comments or questions, or even, get off mute and actually participate. So with that being said, the session for today is really about 3 components, and we'll see how deep we go into each one of those components based on your interests. So I also want to hear from you what you want to hear more about. The first part of my presentation is about the major trends that we see in technology, sourcing, procurement, and vendor management that pertain to both public and private organizations. The second part is a bit more customized towards your space, and we're talking about the challenges you are facing in the public sector as you're trying to create more speed and agility in procurement and sourcing. And I will share with you some frameworks we have developed and have a little bit of dialogue around what can work or cannot work in your world. And then the last part that I had for today was around supplier relationship management and how we see that becoming actually more and more important in the public sector as well. And it has been a space that for a while we haven't been really developing in government and states and towns and cities, etc., etc. So that's the agenda for the presentation. Any comments or questions before I move forward?
No.
Okay. Okay. All right. Sure. As I said, I'm not using Zoom that often for work, so I'm trying to see where the chat box is. So if anybody wants to put something in the chat box, I can at least, oh, there it is. So let me move it to the other screen. So yes, please don't hesitate while I'm presenting to put your comments if you want, or as I said, even get off mute and ask your questions or make your comments. I will also be stopping every now and then to see if there is anything you want to add, or I will ask a question as well.
Yanni,
So, yes.
because it's a public meeting, we don't use the chat because the public needs to be able to see the comments. So anybody
Okay.
Interrupt you and ask you a question.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for that. My apologies. I wasn't aware. So yes, please don't hesitate. All right. So with that being said, let's, very, very basic first slide here, but it's a very important slide around the story of what's happening out there. Global IT spend, technology spend keeps growing. So what you see here is nothing like a rocket science. It's the reality of our world. So even in your organizations, you can see that there is a proliferation of technology. And the major challenge because of that is that now technology is everywhere. In the past, our stakeholders used to be very specific. There were people in an IT department. Now our stakeholders are everywhere, and it's everyone. And depending on how we are organized, we might be bypassed or not, and even in the public sector. So it's very important to recognize that for us who are in technology sourcing and procurement, our roles are becoming more and more central to the success of our organization, no matter what that success is defined as. In your case, might be how you serve the public. In the private sector, might be revenue. But the reality is our role is becoming more and more integral to the success of what we are doing as a core mission. So for today, as I said, we will really spend time on the major trends. And then we're gonna go into challenges specific to you actually. So let's start with the first trend. For a very long time, both in public and private sector, they were telling us we need to save money. In your case, and correct me if I'm wrong, but your tenders had cost as the primary focus, and that has been changing, right? is still important. We still don't want to waste taxpayer money, but the reality is we were very reactive and we were relying on one negotiation or one process to try and bring the cost down. Now, as technology is moving towards cloud more and more, so we're not buying software on premise, we're buying software as a service. We're not buying hardware and infrastructure for our own data centers. We start moving towards infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. The reality is that the name of the game, it's not about cost cutting at the time of signature. It's about building contracts that allow us to drive a continuous cost management. That's, by the way, is what we will discuss later on around vendor management as well. The value is not only in fighting for better pricing, it's making sure that what we negotiated is something that we can follow through with and we can keep our costs under control. Because you might negotiate a great subscription model for a SaaS contract, and you might bring the cost down, but if there is no control on how we add subscriptions in our environments, and people don't understand the risks around what we call true ups, for example, we will suffer down the road. The same with how we terminate those contracts. If we terminate a SaaS contract today and we want our data back, as an example, if we are not careful, vendors might charge us a lot of money to get our data back. So this new world has a lot of hidden costs and a lot of tricks and tips that we need to give to people like us in sourcing and procurement to make sure that we protect ourselves on a continuous basis. Let me stop here for a second and see if that one makes sense and if there are any comments or questions.
I think that makes sense. Go ahead.
I was going to say, this is Mark
Yeah, go
from the
ahead,
city of Tempe. This is something we put into our contracts is, we get the data upon any kind of termination of contract. Is this what you're seeing to help protect agencies, or are there other things we should be doing?
Yeah, so it's one thing to, put language in there that you will get your data back, right? And most probably you also have language that the vendors have to erase everything and give you a proof that they erased everything. So this is really, Mark, about data protection, which is great that you're already doing it. What I'm talking about is when a SaaS vendor actually is hosting and backing up our data somewhere else, and we are not doing it ourselves, when the time comes for transitioning to another vendor or terminating that relationship, we will ask for our data back, as you said, right? We want it back. If we are not clear in contracts that that data has to come back to us in a format that we want and without any additional charges, we are running a risk that at that time, the vendor will tell us, I want $10 per gigabyte to give you your data back. And at that point, getting your data back becomes so expensive that it might change your full strategy and not allow you to move to another product. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and by the way, if you want to ask me about contracting, I don't have it in the main agenda today, but I will be throwing things here and there. I'm doing a lot of software as a service contracts. So if it's of interest to you, I can incorporate that conversation in the presentation. So please let me know if you want, after the trends, to go into contracting because you think it's interesting. I can do that. Anybody who actually has a post-contract experience in terms of not you doing it, but in your organization, someone managing cloud consumption. Is that something that has hit you as organizations, or it's still in the early stages right now? Okay, I will move on, but go ahead, Tracy. You want to say
It's
something?
early stages for surprise. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the reason I'm asking you about that is, again, we can share material after the session through Caroline, but it's coming, and it's good to understand what are the risks post-contract and how a cloud environment or an infrastructure as a service environment can grow really fast to a point that your budget might not be enough. And it's good for you as the people involved in the contracting to maybe have an educational role for everybody else who wants to go down that path, because the risks are not always in the contract phase in this new era. It's afterwards as well. So in any ways, that's that first trend. The second one is digitization, right? Digital government. We hear that in Europe, in Canada, here in the US. How can we create services for our constituents that are digital, are easier, is easy access, easy, everything has to be easy, right? So that's what we hear around the globe, to be honest, in the Western world at least. So from this slide, what I want you to really focus on and think about is this last data point. Everybody is going to be pushing for shortening timelines. Nothing really new, right? They always told us in sourcing and procurement, you are a bottleneck. You are slowing us down. In public sector, oh, your regulation is killing us. I cannot be going through an RFP for 12 months, 14 months. So I'm sure you have heard all those comments. I guess what is new here is that even in government, we are coming to a point where whoever is building regulation and laws is reconsidering the processes to make them more agile. And on top of that, because of the concept of social value, which is about supporting our local communities, supporting diversity and inclusion, which means we want to work with smaller organizations, we need to come up with new ways of sourcing, because these organizations cannot afford 9 to 12 months to 18 months RFPs. So again, the pressure you will feel potentially in your organizations is someone demanding speed, demanding ease, demanding you to try to engage more with local and diverse organizations. Is that something that you see as pressure, or it's more as, you know, nice to have right now? What are your thoughts around that?
Well, I know from our standpoint, we are the ones pushing the procurement to move faster.
Okay.
So,
and Audrey, what's your role in your organization?
we're almost everybody here is like a CIO or an IT director.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So the reason I'm talking about sourcing and procurement, it's because we need to look at them, right? That's the purpose of the session today, to look at those areas as capabilities, not as functions that are outside our world. Because you know very well in your roles how it's derailing you from achieving your goals. And what I'm telling procurement people is that there is a way within the restrictions of the regulation to move with more speed. And that's an element of what I want to show you today, that maybe you can take back to those teams and see if they want any follow-up of how they can help themselves to help you.
Yanni, this
yeah, go ahead.
Maricopa, yeah. Hey, how you doing?
Good.
Yeah,
How
you
are
know,
you?
interesting. We've started a program with our procurement group to really automate the whole process flow from idea all the way through RFP to procure to purchase and all of that. We're using OnBase as the platform for that. So there's been a little bit of a recognition there that, you know,
Okay.
they need to move faster in what they do in serving the county.
Yeah, Ed, in practice, do you feel that with that level of automation, things are a bit better?
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. We're just working on it
okay,
now.
all right.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's great, because I will show you when we go into the process on the major challenges that we believe you're facing. So I want to see if you agree before I give you an answer on what can be done to meet those challenges. And one of those is how can we speed up the internal process through automation? So it's great that you're already trying to do it because that is an element of the equation, let's say. So thank you for sharing. Anybody else who sees that as a problem and trying to go down a path of solving it? Is anybody, I'm not going to say bypassing procurement, but does anyone feel that in their county or city has more flexibility? Like can you go to single sourcing when you want? Or actually that's out of the question and everything has to go through a tender?
We can do sole source. You just have to have a justification for it.
And Travis, do you feel like it's jumping through hoops to justify, or it's actually reasonable as a process?
I think it's reasonable. We don't do it a lot. I'm not saying you can do it. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, it's again, that's an element of how we want slowly to bring supplier relationship management and vendor management in the conversation as well. Because even though very often in government you sign long-term contracts, the reality is, even if it's a 5-year contract with a vendor, there is not a lot of investment of building close partnerships around the future, because what I've seen, and maybe it's not the case for all of you, what I see is that we're not going to spend the time, because when the contract comes to expiration, we're going to go out to the market again anyways. So I see a problem not only from a vendor management perspective, I see a problem from a continuity of strategy perspective as well, because I see renewals being very difficult. And I don't know if that's your experience, but when the time for renewals come, I see many procurement organizations pushing IT leaders very hard to go back to the market. And really that is causing problems, because as you know very well, the past investments might not be recognized in the process. So that's the second trend. The third one is, and for you as IT in the public sector, this one we're not going to spend too much time on. This one is talking about the business, IT, not working through the proper channels of procurement, but going towards direct buying without involving the right people. I think that doesn't apply in your world because you have to follow process and regulation. But what probably applies to you is that you want to take a leadership position as IT leaders into how you're deciding around vendors and how selection moves and all of that. And what we are trying to do is to show to sourcing and procurement that in order for them to be able to do that for you, they need to reposition themselves and change. So a very important element of that is data. So when Ed spoke about automation of the process, there is another element that can really help you mature your sourcing and procurement capabilities. And that is 3 types of data plus market data. And what I'm talking about is contract data, spend data, and asset data. What happens in most organizations is the contract repositories are very weak and we're missing documents. The spend visibility is so and so, because even though we know who we are spending with, we don't go as deep as what are we buying and what is the unit level pricing. And then software asset management especially suffers. And again, you can tell me how it's in your world. So if we don't have all of our contracts, if our software asset management is not strong, it's very difficult to build commercial strategies because we don't know a lot about entitlements versus utilization. We don't know a lot about the commercial terms and conditions in our contracts. We don't know how we spend our dollars to the finest detail. So those people who should be able to bring you as IT leaders the data you need to build strategies are not capable of doing so. So in order for you to lead sourcing and procurement, both from your IT strategy perspective, but also the commercial strategy perspective, we need to do more around data. And that needs investments, and it needs to become a priority. So that is what this trend is all about, repositioning sourcing and procurement as a facilitation and enablement function, not as the one that is tactically running your tenders. And again, I don't see it. I mean, it's still slower in the public sector than in the private, but does it make sense as a concept, at least for you? Do you recognize an opportunity, or you think that's something that right now there's no need for it to be a priority in your world?
Mark, City of Tempe, I'll go ahead and pop in real quick. One of the
Sure.
things that we've been doing, and I know other cities are doing, is working with Bloomberg and their What Works City certifications. One of the things in there is results driven and data driven contracting.
Okay.
And so that is one of the areas that we've been building data around how we do renewals and ensuring that those renewals are outcome driven. And it's not just for IT procurement, it's for all procurement,
Okay.
which is doing that check-in, that scorecard before we do that renewal. And then to your point, in the government space, we work pretty closely with procurement. So procurement catches any IT procurement and then funnels it our direction. So we are very lucky to have them really having our backs.
Okay.
And so some get by. I'm not going to say it's 100%, but the ones that do get by, that get caught, end up having to go through the process anyway. So like I said, we've been very fortunate.
Great. And what you mentioned, Mark, like the scorecard is a result of overall vendor management approaches, and are you doing it more often, or it's something that you look at only before renewals?
It's done once a year, so right before renewal, and it is done by whoever manages that particular contract. So it's done actually within the departments.
Okay. All right, that's great. Anybody else who is doing things like that to have more visibility around vendor performance and how vendors are doing, so it can make your decisions around renewals, where you can actually drive a renewal clearer or easier?
I said from Maricopa, I didn't have a comment in that regard, but I did want to note that
Sure.
I think the COVID situation has kind of put procurement in a spotlight, like many organizations, but I think really put them in a spotlight to how can they move quickly, acquiring all this PPE and all this stuff. So we saw a lot of proactive direction and activity from procurement in that regard, and perhaps that sets a foundation for the future then that they can move quickly, make good decisions, and provide what we need without potentially some of the overhead of the process.
Yeah, that's a very good point, then. To your point, I asked actually different procurement people, both in the private and public sector. During COVID, you were asked to procure things faster. You were asked to find opportunities for cost optimization as well. But on the speed side of things, do you feel like you can actually go and do it faster without breaking regulation? And I was told yes. So to your point, the COVID situation might have become an opportunity for them to realize that they were restricting, in some cases, you by being way too conservative on the interpretation of the regulation and their policy being much stricter than the regulation. So coming out of the pandemic, you might have an opportunity to make it more permanent and see more speed than you have seen in the past. And let me go to the last trend, and that is about sustainability. Overall, in organizations, there is a big conversation around sustainability. And sustainability includes a lot of things. It's not just environmental sustainability. As I said earlier, it's diversity and inclusion. It's modern day slavery. It's fair wages. It's all of the environmental stuff around CO2 emissions, water consumption, energy consumption, etc., etc. So it's becoming a critical factor for both public and private organizations in terms of how they incorporate it in their engagements with vendors. So what we expect to see more in IT is a push from somewhere within the enterprise and or your organizations telling you that as you're thinking about tenders and vendors and products and services, you have to incorporate in the conversation some sustainability related factors. And some of them have been in the picture for some time. Here in the US, there is diversity and inclusion regulation. I think there was an executive order some time ago on the topic as well that's affecting how you procure. But the environmental stuff hasn't really been influencing IT until recently. And right now I am getting, as an analyst, 2 to 3 calls a week with organizations around building a program to drive a sustainable portfolio of vendors. We are not ahead of other categories, of course, because speed, agility, and capabilities are still the major priorities. But sustainability is coming our way. So that's the fourth trend, and these were the 4 main trends we are seeing as Gartner. First of all, I want to do a time check here. How much time do I have left before you have to move to your next agenda item?
David, how are we doing?
It's up to the chair's discretion, but I think he's gone about 15 minutes so far.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, if you've got more, you can.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm, cognizant of your meeting, and I don't want to go down a path that maybe, right now you want to do something different. I have 2 more things for you here today, and I wanted to ask you what makes more sense to you. As IT leaders, do you want to hear more about SaaS contracting and the challenges of those as a service contract, that even though you are not going to negotiate them, it might be of interest to know the risks? Or do you want to go down the path of speed and agility and how we can incorporate a process that makes things a little bit faster? I'm okay to go either way, but I just want to see what you prefer.
I would be interested to hear more about the risks.
Okay. The contractual risk, you mean, Tracy?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Anybody else?
Risk.
I agree.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, great. So let me go through those slides a little bit quicker here, and we're gonna go into the risks. So when it comes to SaaS contracts, there are 3 areas that we really focus on because they can really cause us major headaches. And even though I have risk in the middle, all of them are risks. So it's cost, operational risk, that's the word that is missing from the slide, and the end of the relationship and exit. So let me take you through some of those, and I will try to do it in the next 10, 15 minutes and again, be respectful of your time here.
So let's do it within 10 minutes. We've got some other things we need to.
Okay, we can do it through next 10 minutes, no problem.
Okay.
So I will go as quickly as I can here. When it comes to SaaS contracts, and that's very important, when you're trying to buy cloud, your first negotiation, your first contract is the time you have your maximum leverage. When you sign that contract and you implement the product and the solution, at that point, the vendor has leverage over you. So when the time comes for the expiration of your agreement, you are a little bit at their mercy if you want to renew. We see it right now with the inflation problems we have around the world. We've seen vendors coming back to customers with 15 to 20% price increases that the customers cannot do anything to stop them from going after. So we want to put some sort of controls around future pricing when we negotiate our initial contract. And as you can see on the bottom here, something like a 3 to 5%, or you can include the consumer price index. But we have to make sure that there is some sort of a cap around future pricing. Some of the major vendors are providing those as part of their contracts already. So Salesforce provide one, SAP, Workday. Some others, provide, like Oracle will negotiate. Some of them will never provide it. But the reality is we want to try and go after that one. When you start buying SaaS, we have to be very clear around what's happening with volumes, with subscriptions, additional subscriptions, and how we make sure we have good grasp of the growth of our environments. So understanding the subscription metrics and what is triggering a true up is very, very critical. If we don't understand that, we might be surprised by our next invoice after we implement something. And the third one, from a cost perspective, is around what we call unforeseen costs. A vendor might show you this is what you're paying for subscription, and they might even try to make it look lower than what you were paying for on-premise maintenance. But then you have encryption, you have sandboxes, you have storage, you have backup fees that might be line items somewhere else in the agreement and you might not be aware of. So we need to be aware that in the SaaS world, where everything is an operating expense, by the way, there are all these other unforeseen costs that we need to be aware of that can really derail our budget. So we talked about true ups. So today, most of the SaaS contracts can only go up, they cannot go down. So when you are thinking about buying SaaS, be aware that if you buy 200 subscriptions, but you are not going to use those subscriptions from the get-go, you will be paying for them from the get-go. So you can negotiate a ramping up approach where you start with fewer, and as you implement, you can go up. But be aware that in today's world, SaaS contracts can only go up, they cannot go down. The pandemic taught us one thing, that we need to put language in there that if there is a major business disruption, which is different than force majeure, we want to be able to reduce our subscriptions for a period of time, maybe 6 to 9 months. That could have helped many companies and organizations to protect themselves financially during the pandemic. So these are the financial ones. I will go, I think do I have 5 more minutes here? Or I'm done?
4 minutes.
4 minutes, all right. So I will go to the last few that I really want to point out, and it's about termination. As I mentioned earlier, and I think Mark, you asked me the question around data. we need to be very careful to negotiate the right termination clauses at the beginning of the relationship. So we want to be able to get our data back in a certain period, 30, 60 days. We want to be very clear on what format the data needs to be in. We want to make sure they delete our data and that we get our data back without having to pay anything extra. All of that will really protect you when the time comes to pivot to another provider or to build an internal capability. Very often we ignore those things and we suffer down the road. And the last thing is around SLAs. In the SaaS world, we want 2 SLAs, and I will finish with that at a minimum. The SLAs we want are uptime, and we want to have something around incident response and incident resolution. But it's very difficult, as you can see here, to get resolution commitment. So at a minimum, try and get a resolution target in your contracts. So you know that your ITSM group can go after vendors when you have an incident to try to resolve it within the target, even if it's not a commitment. In any ways, I will stop here. We can go deeper into a lot of those things. I know that you are senior leaders and you're not doing the contracting, but in this new world, it's very important for people to understand all of those risks, because even procurement and sourcing doesn't always know those things, and our people in IT need to be aware. So thank you very much for your time, and I can take your final comments or questions if you have any.
Thank you, Yanni. Are there any other questions from the membership?
None for me. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, we'll move on. Thanks again, Yanni.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
You bet. All right. So agenda item 5 is the committee will participate in a roundtable discussion on telecommuting and hybrid work models. Anybody want to kick off what they're doing in their agency with regards to telecommuting?
Well, we pretty much discovered people don't want to come back.
We did a survey, employee engagement survey, and like 95%, said they're loving it, they're productive, and then they're already seeing like the county's lifted its mask mandate, and you're seeing some articles now in the popular press, and Goldman Sachs recently calling everybody back to work. So I'm getting all kinds of questions now. What are we going to do? We're kind of back to where we were at the beginning of this whole thing. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
So any thought or discussion around, whether you all would allow 100% teleworking? I know I've had that come up a few times, and my response has been that I don't see us, and our city managers said as much, that we'd ever go to 100% teleworking situation, but we're flexible, but not 100%. So what are you guys doing? And gals,
I think the concept of 100% is probably a little strong, but I think ongoing flexibility will be the order of the day.
Right. Same here in Surprise. And it is really going to depend on the job role. But what have you guys, have any of you looked at like flex workspace? So I'm kind of outgrowing my space, and we have certain divisions that, probably and mostly do telework. So we were thinking about asking them about, maybe giving up their cubicles, but still having some sort of flex workspace. Has anybody else worked on that yet? Or
yeah, we've in Mesa. Yeah, in Mesa, we've had the conversation. We hadn't done anything with it, and I know over in the city hall, we're not. My department's not at City Hall, but in City Hall they have some workspace. Mark, you look like you're dying to say something.
don't know that I'm dying to say something, but
Yes, you are.
yeah, so first of all, the city manager said that you're going to come in 1 day per week. That's like the minimum. And then each department can kind of go from there. And that's what we're doing is we're having IT come in 1 day per week. And then to that point, we just finished consolidating from 2 buildings into 1. And what we ended up doing after talking with employees is rather than a flex space, they wanted their own space. So we're doing cube sharing, and then we've shifted the schedule so there's just 1 person in that cube per day. And so we've got 3 people sharing a cube. And then we also have, flex space as well. But people are really liking it. They like the flexibility, and everybody was on board, and we got rid of a lease. And so when we got rid of the lease, we were able to repurpose that money, and city manager let me keep it, which was really nice. But it's working very well. It's taken some adjustment because, like I said, everybody kind of got used to having their own cube, but having to share it. But everybody really wanted that landing spot. That was what was really important.
Mark, did you still have, so you had mentioned that 3 people share a cube. Did you still give them a cubby hole or a drawer that was dedicated to them? I mean, like, how did you work through that?
That's exactly what we did is we made sure everybody had like a little filing cabinet and an overhead for each person. And then they share a phone, and then we did docking stations with 2 monitors, keyboard, mouse. And so they just come in, dock, and use that setup.
And then, so for your flex space, is that if like a whole group had to come in and collab, that's what you're using that for?
Exactly. And then the other thing is we almost had created like an HOA document, right? Which is, the cube owner's document states that you've got a private space, but you might have to be flexible. And so if you come in and somebody's in that space, just take another space, whatever's available.
That sounds great, man. I like what you guys are doing. Our city manager started on, I guess, the opposite end of the spectrum, and said that, okay, we can do, the city of Mesa would do 2 days per pay period. So basically a day a week. And it's not a privilege, which hopefully everybody understands that. And it's at the discretion of the department directors, as far as flexibility in that. And so I've got folks that telework more than 2 days of pay period, but it's just, I try not to write something down, in my department and say, we will do these things. I'd rather the managers of the different divisions kind of work with their groups on it and encourage them not to talk, which they will, but talk across divisions, because not everyone works the same way, as Tracy pointed out. And so,
well, you have hardware technicians, you have things like that. There's no way they can really telework. They have to physically have hands-on equipment and things like that. So they don't really feel it's fair, but I said, well, then go work for the application team if you don't like it. I mean, it's really, this is what you do. And this, so we get a little bit of that once in a while, but I do like the shared cubicle idea. That's, and just having a dedicated drawer for them, or a filing cabinet, like you had said, Mark. That's a really good idea.
The other thing we did, Tracy, with the hardware folks is we rotate them out. So we rotate them out through being like a hardware tech to answering phones. And so the city manager did give us the latitude where they do a 2-week in the office, 2 weeks out of the office kind of stint. And so that way we were able to kind of equitably do this kind of distributed teams.
So rotating the help desk, basically.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
interesting. So anyone else have anything different?
Travis said, we are actively working on a hoteling kind of solution for the enterprise using ServiceNow. They have a tool called Workspace Finder, and public health was interested. So we started with them and really helped mature this product with ServiceNow. You know, ServiceNow is the kind of group that says yes to everything. So yeah, we kind of work through it with them, and we're starting to offer it out to the enterprise. So we'll use that, and for the departments that want to get into it, it's one of these softwares that allows you to schedule a space or a conference room and that kind of thing. So I think we'll find some good use for that.
Okay. That's creative. Good deal. Any other discussion with regards to telecommunications or telecommuting and that? If not, we'll move to agenda item 6, which is agency project update. If anyone has anything they'd like to update the group on. Somebody's got to be working on something. I know Mark's not. He never does anything. But
Just trying to keep the lights on, Travis.
that's right. Not the truth. There's so many things.
Travis says, yeah. And
Oh, go ahead,
again,
Ed.
yeah, we have a couple of big enterprise projects this year. We've got our CGI upgrade going to version 4.4. That's scheduled for July 4th. And we have Workday September 19th. So kind of recarpeting the whole house, if you will, with the 2 major platform systems for the county. So yeah, those are big areas of attention for us. Lots of integration activity and all the things that go along with those kinds of projects.
Cool. Yeah, here in Mesa, we're in the process of our police department's in the process of building out a real-time crime intel center, and that's going to be a huge undertaking, and that we're leveraging ARPA funds for that, and also deploying, expanding our public Wi-Fi reach into some areas of the city that are underserved, and deploying CBRS as well. Anybody else?
I'd say, Travis, we're just finishing up on base, and Ed, I might get with you about what you've done with procurement, because we're doing the agenda management and of course the document management piece of it, replacing Sire. But after that's done, we're starting to look at the workflows. So I might get with you.
Yeah, please. We've got really deep experience with on base on many fronts. So happy to share anything we can with you.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Hey, Travis, Jeff here in Avondale. We're looking at, we're currently using ADP for payroll. So we're doesn't look like we're going to go away from ADP, but kind of trying to renegotiate that contract a little bit and see maybe what we can do with that and bring in a few extra modules. We need to kind of enhance our HRIS system and some of that. So see what ADP can do for us. So it's kind of on our radar.
Cool. It's not a small undertaking. People like getting paid, so don't mess it up, Jeff.
It's important.
Good deal. Well, cool. So, what about our request for future agenda items? Anyone have anything we should capture? And hearing none, then David, could you please summarize any task assigned? I don't believe there were any.
Sorry, Travis. Maybe there could be some updates on broadband for the community.
Yeah.
I know a couple of you guys sit on committees at a higher level. Maybe there's some updates, Mark, or I'm not sure who else is on there, but I know Mark is. Something in that arena would be great.
Okay.
And then action items, I'll follow up about the future agenda item Tracy just mentioned.
Awesome. Well, good deal. Well, we can give you 5 minutes back if we've got nothing else. Our next meeting is Thursday, May the 19th at 9 a.m.
Yeah, and Chair, that's moved up an hour because of another meeting, but I also want to bring up that the MAG offices meetings rooms are opening back up again. So if so wanted, we can host the meeting in person, but there will be a Zoom option as well for those who want to attend remotely.
I look forward to getting back down to MAG and interacting with you all and kind of nudging Mark in the ribs, in real time, and be cool.
Absolutely, Travis.
Good stuff.
Plus, I mean, there's nothing better than the MAG parking a garage.
Yeah, I mean, really.
I'm just glad I drive a car and not a truck.
That's what I meant. This is the last time
Yeah.
I went, I took my truck and I had to go down to the basement and
Ugh,
squeeze into a spot. It's like, all
it's
right.
like claustrophobic.
Light rail.
It doesn't
have
come out
great-
to surprise. Come on.
No, yeah. Okay. Touche.
Yeah.
Well, with that,
Motion
this
to
is-
adjourn.
yeah, motion to adjourn. So we've got Tracy,
I'll second.
Mark. So with that, business is now concluded, and it's great seeing you all.
Have a good day, guys. Thank you.
Thanks, Travis. See you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all. Bye.